I want you to think about a standout moment where you've had a manager who's actually really helped you succeed. And can you tell me about that example?
Yeah, it was you. She wasn't expecting that.
Do you think that's your responsibility to call out? Actually, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here. Or do you think that you would want a manager who would maybe sense the uncertainty?
The reason I'm getting excited is like there's layers to that. You're gonna hate the first word I say, depends. It depends on the EQ of the manager.
So we obviously also run a lot of management programs, but we're gonna forget everything we know about management. Flip the switch. Hello, I'm Millie Gladstone and welcome to Sparks, a series by Sagos. I'm joined today by two of my colleagues, Blair Wagner and Reuben Fletcher-Louis. Welcome both.
Hi.
Hey, Millie.
Hello, great to have you on. It's quite a nice podcast today because we are on the same team. So it's basically just a recorded team meeting is how I'm looking at it.
That's how I'm gonna treat it.
We can dish out all the feedback.
Yeah.
So we are talking about management today, but through the lens of how we like to be managed as members of a team. But you do both, of course, have some management experience. So Blair, you have taken on the mantle of managing many of our grads that came through.
Yes, so I've managed a few grads. I think that came about because I actually started out as a grad, so it seemed fitting to be able to take those experiences and then use that to then manage people coming in. And Reuben happens to be one of those grads as well. He's moved on beyond my management now, but it was fun managing you in your first, was it 6 months?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
More on that later.
I know. Let's see if that's the truth.
And Reuben, you've managed a hockey team. Am I right in thinking?
Absolutely. So while I was at university, I took a sabbatical from playing myself to take on one of the women's sports teams, the hockey team. Sort of a big picture manager of the whole tactical process and the training, as well as some finer detail, managing the people, taking on their feedback, progressing them up the ranks and up the teams. Loved it.
Getting strategic as well.
Exactly.
Fabulous. So we obviously also run a lot of management programs for some of our fabulous clients, like Schindler springs to mind. But we're going to forget everything we know about management. Flip
It's
the
gone.
switch. Reuben's eyes.
It's gone.
It's all been wiped away. Because what I want to look at today is, as I said, how we like to be managed, how we manage up maybe as well. And actually when you are maybe an individual contributor, how you can take on managing projects or managing peers in a way that's efficient and effective, if that sounds good.
Sounds great.
Love it.
Alrighty, okay. So let's focus first then on being managed. I'm going to ask you quite a personal question now. How can a manager get the best out of you? Blair, I'll start.
I think when I feel like I'm truly being listened to, and that it feels collaborative, that we're both thinking about how we work well together versus it just being top down, I think that's when you get the best out of me. I think it also depends on what we're working on as well, what type of management that I need. If it's something that I have less certainty about or less expertise on, I think I definitely do need a more top-down approach, like someone to take the reins more and put me in more of like in a position of like learning from them. But if it's something that I feel I can really get my hands into and I understand what I'm doing, I like for there to be a bit more autonomy for me. So yeah. So I would say it depends on the project or what we're working on.
As always, it
Yeah.
depends is the answer.
I know.
And I guess because of that, do you ever try and set the expectation? So if you're working on a project, actually maybe, where you do need a bit more support, like you said, because it's new, you're learning something, you need something to be a bit more top down.
Yeah.
Do you ever actually say that up front, or do you kind of let the project roll and see what happens?
So I feel that I've learned to say that. When I was a grad, I definitely didn't know. I think when you're in that, and you can probably relate to this, when you're in that grad position, you're just trying really hard to show that you're capable. You're trying to show your skills, show that you're good at what you're doing. That sometimes you don't always say when you may need more support because you think in that moment that it may mean you're not good at what you're doing, even though it doesn't mean that. Remember that, Reuben? But I think as I've grown and my skills have improved as well and my knowledge has increased, oops, sorry, I've learned to be more vocal about the level of support that I need and how I like to be managed as well.
So instead of just being blinded by the need to say yes because you want to prove your worth and prove your value, even if you're not quite sure what the ask is or what you're meant to be doing.
Yeah.
And interesting question actually comes to mind from that. Do you think that's your responsibility to call out, actually, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here? Or do you think that you would want a manager who would maybe sense the uncertainty and call that out? Or do you want them to give you the autonomy to kind of run with it and, make the mistakes and learn and see what happens?
You ask such good questions because the reason I'm getting excited is like there's layers to that, and I don't want to give a long-winded answer.
No, please do. It's a podcast. It's what we're here for.
You're gonna hate the first word I say. Depends. Only, but hear me out. Hear me out. I think it depends on the EQ of the manager. If I can sense that a manager can't sense that, then I feel like I need to call it out. But if I feel that the manager has that understanding, then maybe I give them the space to call out like what level of support that I need. Does that make any sense?
It does.
I think the reason I'm getting excited because then we're moving into the topic of managing upwards, like realizing where I need to step in or not step in, because managers are humans, right? We forget that. They're not just telling us what to do, but they are their own people that are still developing their own skills. And sometimes even the most experienced person will still have strengths in certain areas and maybe need to improve in different areas. So they may be great at the sort of logistical side, the process, knowing exactly what needs to be done, by when it needs to be done, and how we need to do it. But the people side may not be fully there yet. So they might think, I clearly said what needs to be done, so it's fine. Everyone knows what they need to do. But they may not be able to read the room yet and recognize that grad is saying yes, but inside they might be trembling a little bit. They're not quite sure what to do.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, someone may have the people side down and they may be overly focused on that, but then and maybe we'll get into that later, but then may not have like the process side down or, know exactly how to brief something in or be clear on all the details because they're so focused on just making sure that the people side is comfortable. And I think sometimes when you're being managed, you have to also learn to read that person and learn what their skills are as well.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah.
I want to hear your thoughts, Reuben. As somebody who is a grad, do you think it's the manager's responsibility to check that actually you are comfortable with the task? Or do you think it's on you to say, help me?
I think it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
I think it definitely goes both ways and both people have a part to play. I think over communication is really important. It might not be sexy, but I think it works. I think there's definitely a time and a place for both people having their input and saying what they think and sharing their ideas and whether they think they can just get on with it and be pushed and be challenged. And then actually maybe that was the first plan, but the second plan is maybe I need some more support. And then the person being managed chips back in and goes, can I have some more help? So I think it goes both ways.
I'm going to pick up on a term that you've used there, over communication. What does that mean and what does that look like?
I think over communication is almost sharing every detail and everything that needs to be done, everything you expect. It's all about giving someone who's doing something everything they need to know to do it really well. So it might not be everything written down on a piece of paper. There you go, go away and do it. But I think it's sharing a lot. It's sharing everything they need to know to do a really great job. It might take a little bit more time. It might be a little bit more time consuming. You might have to assume they don't know some things they might know. And they might initially feel like, well, I already know that. Why are you sharing that with me? But I think in the right relationship where you trust each other and you have those sort of processes where you know you might be oversharing and they might already know it, it's okay. They're not going to be offended. They can take it.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you're coming at it from the angle of if somebody is delegating a task to you or to somebody on their team, actually, the manager or the delegator in that instance should be over communicating. Here's everything you need to know to get on with it. Do you think it also works back that if you are the person, the delegatee, shall we say, that you should also be communicating back, deadlines, when you'll have things done, what's clear, what's not clear?
Definitely. I think being organised and not doing it in a sort of dumping way, just chucking a bunch of words at them is really important, and doing it in a nice way that considers other things they might be doing, maybe putting a few questions in one Slack message rather than a question, 5 minutes later, a question, 5 minutes later, "Oh, I'm almost done. I'm almost done." So being considered with it and being smart is really important. But I think over communication is good.
Deliberate over communication.
Deliberate for sure.
Yeah, nice.
I don't
like
think
it.
there is such a thing as over communication though.
I knew you'd say that. Go on, tell us.
How did you know? You don't know me. Because I think considering the industry and the pace that we work at, especially here at Sagos, it is a very fast-paced environment. Over communication can save us a lot of grief. I think that's just regular communication to me. I'd rather know and get that message and, know that everything's going right than be left guessing and have to ask. So I think people may feel like it's over communication, because I think that's another dynamic between a manager and someone being managed, is feeling like you're annoying your manager. You've never annoyed me. Don't think that. But I know I've felt that way before, feeling like I'm annoying someone, but it's actually, me personally, I'll speak from my experience. It just gives me a sense of peace to know that you're even thinking about it and communicating it to me. So in my mind, there can be no over communication.
It's the same as when we're managing a project for a client, right?
Yeah.
You never want them to be chasing you for something.
Exactly.
You want to be anticipating, communicating. Yep, you'll have that by the end of the week before they get the chance to email you.
Yep.
Okay, interesting. Coming back to my original question, love that journey that we all just went on together. But Reuben, how can a manager get the best out of you?
I think for me, it maybe comes down to two things: trust and knowing me. So the knowing me is about knowing what I'm good at, knowing what I'm not so good at. So knowing my strengths. Maybe if you're asking me to do something that I'm good at, you might give me some more freedom, some more autonomy to do it my way. You might take the reins off a little bit, you might step back and you might let me do it. And if you know I'm not so good at it, then you're going to probably step in, provide some more support. It probably also means knowing what I like to do. So maybe finding me things, parts of a project that you know I'll enjoy, because that's probably also where I'll do best. If you're managing a project and you have a few people that are involved, allocating the task based on what people like the most might also mean what people would do the best in, and you'll probably get the best outcome from that. And then trust. I think it's really important to trust people, especially when it's in a one-to-one sort of relationship. Knowing that your manager trusts you is super important, and you'll feel comfortable, you'll feel safe. You can go back to them and say, you know what, I actually need some more help. You can say, actually, can you step in now? And I think that's really important.
So a very relational approach. And when you're saying that you expect a manager to know you, know your strengths, know what you're good at and what you like doing, how, if somebody watching this is thinking, oh, that sounds like the way that I want to be managed, how have you made that clear to your manager?
I think it actually goes both ways. The manager can literally ask. They can say, what do you think you're doing really well?
Yeah.
And I think after a certain amount of time with a manager, you will come to know, because you will be reviewing work a lot together, and you'll see regular themes of work you're doing really well, and maybe regular themes of things that aren't so good. Hopefully over time those diminish and they don't become so regular because you work on them. I definitely think in the right relationship where there's trust and open communication, it should be. It won't always be, but it should be very easy to say, you know what, I think this is what I'm really good at, and I think this is what I need some more help in.
So what about if there's a situation where, unfortunately, you can't do the work you like? You've got to do the work that you don't like, that probably no one really likes, and you've got to get it done. How does that affect you?
I think that then stems back to sort of your team culture. I think in the right team where you're all working together, probably towards some goals that you all agree on and want to get to, it's all right. You don't mind taking on that task that no one wants to do, because someone has to do it and it's going to get you where you want to be.
And Blair, what do you think? Because probably in your career, there's probably been some tasks or some projects you've had to work on that have maybe pushed you outside your comfort zone, or is something that you don't particularly know and therefore you don't like it. Do you think it's important to push ourselves and to actually put our hands up and say, hey, I want to take on this new thing, even though it might not be playing to my strengths?
Yeah, I do. And this might not be everyone's mindset, but I think it just comes down to your own personal character. Like in life in general, outside of work, there are always going to be things that you don't like. There are always going to be hurdles in life. And I think it trains the mind to deal with those things. Like I mean, it's very rare. I don't want to say it doesn't exist to have a job where everything's perfect and flowers and roses and all of that all the time. You are going to have some tasks that you may not favor, but I think resilience and having a growth mindset, that comes into play, and how you deal with those things. So I think it's important. I think you get stronger when you figure out how you respond to the things that don't immediately align with you. I think it increases that strength and that resiliency. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Definitely. Thank you.
Hopefully I hold myself to that standard.
You do. Don't worry. So have you got, I'm going to give you a moment to reflect, but I want you to think about maybe a standout moment where you've had a manager who's actually really helped you succeed because of something that they've done, or kind of because they've supported you in a particular way. And can you tell me about that example?
Yeah, it was you. She wasn't expecting that. Oh, have I ruined it now? No, but truly, all jokes aside, and we've talked about this. So, I was struggling a bit with a management style that I hadn't had the experience yet to navigate or know how to communicate these things, like the things you just said, Reuben, about having that trust and that safety to say, oh, actually, I need this or need that. It wasn't particularly that person's fault. I just didn't know how to communicate that yet. And then with you just had this really relational style, and you're also just very clear. You're very clear on this is what needs to be done, and taking the time to communicate that. So I think there's no such thing as over communication. I think you recognized I needed that level of communication. And then I think anybody who was working around us at that point can testify that my work got way better because of the level of communication and the type of conversations we would have, which were very open conversations about what I need, what I was missing, and how I can grow. So yeah, you were part of that success story.
Thanks, Blair.
You're welcome.
Classic over
Keep that in, no edits.
And Reuben.
This is going to be just one big feedback session. It's great. My experience is from Blair. She was my manager
look at
for
that.
the first.
I
few
paid him
months
to say
while I was
this.
here. She did. I was in a point where I was building confidence and I was stepping into building my autonomy as I was doing things. That was a part of my progression. It was something we talked about in my personal development, something I was working on. And we had a project for a client building an e-learning in a pretty short time frame. So it was a bit of a challenge, but Blair thought I could do it. She also knew I'd been working on some e-learnings, so I wasn't starting from stage one. And the moral of the story really was that she challenged me. She sent me off and pushed me to take ownership of the project, have the conversations with the clients. But actually, she didn't miss the small details. She thought about exactly what that would mean I would be doing with the client. And she reminded me of the little things, like remember to actually read through what you're going to be talking to the client about so you can have the questions ready. And those sort of things where she'd really thought about it. So she challenged me, she'd really pushed me, but she also had thought ahead and gave me that support and those sort of smaller details. That really helped. That was awesome.
Yeah. Okay. So challenging model, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But that is really important because you have to challenge people, especially at work, because at the end of the day, all we want is a good outcome for the client. So if we've got new ideas and we do need to challenge maybe somebody who's higher up than us, it's something you have to do sometimes. So I guess kind of staying on that thread then and thinking a little bit about managing up. Sometimes we do have to challenge. Sometimes we do have to give feedback. And I guess, what advice would you give to somebody who is wanting to manage upwards? What tips for success have you got? Go on,
I
Blair.
would say personally, what I've done in the past is I really think about the conversation before jumping into it, prepare it, understand what I want to talk about, why I want to talk about it, and also what can be improved if we have this conversation. So that the person understands I'm not just trying to critique them, but this would really help if we worked on this particular topic. I also like to, but you have to be careful with this type of conversation. I like to get a little bit of feedback from other people before I manage upwards. I know sometimes I've come to you and thought, is this valid, the thing that I'm going to bring up, and to other colleagues as well, and get their experiences maybe on how they've had similar conversations, because we've all gone through similar things. So I would say just really think about the conversation, prepare. It might seem a bit silly, but if you go in knowing exactly what you want to say and how you want to say it, then I think that conversation doesn't have to be as difficult as it seems.
Okay, so a couple of things there. So
Yeah.
making sure that maybe you've got the outcome of that
Mhm.
conversation in mind.
Yeah.
And a little bit of like the what's in it for me, for the person that you're managing
Yep.
up, right? What could
Mhm.
be better actually if we do collaborate, have this conversation and reach a better outcome than we are in at the moment.
Yep.
And also talking to peers, getting advice, getting some practice in, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Fabulous. Reuben, what's your experience been? What tips have you got?
I think for me, the biggest tip would be to do it early. Sometimes these managing up conversations are really easy. It's a really open relationship. You do it all the time. It comes very naturally. Sometimes maybe it's a manager that hasn't managed you before, or it's someone who's really senior. You might be a little bit more nervous to do it. And for some people, a natural instinct can be to overthink it, slow down, take your time and not dive head first, which can definitely be good. And it's probably a natural instinct for a reason. But I think it's important to do it early so you're not spending too much time dwelling on it. And so it's not too unexpected. There's a Chinese proverb, and I'm probably going to butcher this,
Yes.
but it says that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. And it basically means if you have already delayed something, if you have already taken a little bit too much time to plant that tree, to manage upwards, to have that conversation, don't worry about it. The next best time to do it is now. Dive straight in and have that conversation. Maybe prepare as well. Think about it. Think about what's in it for me and what's in it for them. Be prepared, but then just have it.
So wise.
Honestly, I wish I would have gotten that advice so long ago. No, it's so true. I'm just going to like back you up on that because I would say that's been my biggest mistake is not having those conversations early. And looking back, I wish I would have had a lot of conversations like a lot earlier in the process. Probably would have saved a lot of grief over certain things, but that's so true.
I think
Yeah.
we're really lucky. We can lean on our culture here.
Yeah.
There's probably not a single person in this company who you couldn't have a conversation like that with. Even the difficult ones, even if it's, I think you missed this, when you're being managed, everyone's so open, everyone's so ready to be told that.
Yeah. And I think, like you were saying earlier, Blair, managers are still human. They're still
Yeah.
figuring some things out. So, yeah, sometimes I know I've been very nervous to have some conversations. And, somebody turned around and been like, oh, yeah, great point. Thanks. And then you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, cool. Okay, sorted. But you're right. It's because you catch something early. You talk about it there and then. You don't let it fester or get worse or result in a bad outcome. So, yeah, plant the tree today, right now.
No, it reminds me of a moment because there was something you said earlier, Reuben, and this is tying together the sharing, what your strengths are, having someone tell you what your strengths are and like where you need to improve, getting that feedback, and then also managers being human. I would say the most impactful conversation that I had was when I told a manager, you give me a lot of constructive criticism, which is great. I know exactly what I need to improve on, but you've never told me what I'm actually good at. Like, what are my strengths? And the light bulb that went off, they were like, oh, I didn't know, that's what you wanted because they'd never really had someone ask them that previously, or that's what I'm assuming. And it changed the dynamic so much and actually really helped me grow as well because then I learned what I was actually good at. And then I was able to then lean into those areas more and grow in those areas. So yeah, remembering that they're human and they just maybe don't know something. And then once you tell them, have that conversation, like you said, the two-way street, it can make such a big difference.
So, Blair, I've got a question for you actually, just hearing you talk there. Obviously, Sagos isn't the only place you've worked or the only industry that you've worked in. I think you've got some experience probably working in some high pressure environments in the hospitality sector. So did you see any examples of really good kind of standout management there, maybe when things are pressured? Putting you on the spot, I know.
I know. Yeah, because Millie is referring to my experience working in, so I worked in a restaurant where I worked in the kitchen and I worked front of house, like on the floor as a server. And in a kitchen, it's funny because communication has to be really tight because you don't have time. So I think having that understanding, trusting each other, because it can also be, not trying to make it scary, but you're working around fire, hot tools, things like that. So you have to be very, very aware of one another. So I think one thing that's really good, and if you've ever worked in a restaurant, you know about like family meal and things like that. Do you know this
No.
concept? Yeah. So chefs will they get tasked, normally one chef, to make a family meal, and it's because we sit down. Oh, sorry, I keep hitting this mic, but family meal. We all sit down together before a shift and have a meal together, and
Okay.
and during that time, it's whoever is the manager on the floor that day will, have a conversation with us, let us know what to expect, things like that. And I think something about delivering that communication while we're sharing a meal together, talking together, really helps. I'm not sure how it relates to this industry, but I think that was like always a thing that I admired that we did, like just sharing a meal together. And then I think also there has to be really clear, open communication going both ways, because especially like in a restaurant, the manager can't see everything that's happening all at one time. So you do have to kind of over communicate, and that over communication, which is why I think there's no such thing. It goes in a kitchen as well. You have to over communicate. That's why even sometimes I still have this habit of saying like, oh, behind corner, you'll notice if like we're making coffee at the machine, I'll say that, because you literally have to communicate everything that you're doing at every moment, because not communicating, I mean, it's the reason why I have certain burns on my arms and things like that, because someone didn't say that pan is hot. You can't assume that someone knows something. I've grabbed like a sheet pan thinking it was fine because no one communicated that was hot. Yeah.
Ugh.
Not fun to work with burned palms for a week, but yeah, so I don't believe in over communication for that reason. Like, you just can never assume that everyone knows everything that's going on. So I would say that's something that I maybe took from that.
Yeah. And there are parallels there as well.
Yeah.
Sharing a meal, most companies probably have
Yeah.
socials
True,
or
yeah.
lunches together, where actually you can get to know your team, your manager, whoever it is, on a more personal level, which, as we know, helps with communication in the workplace as well. And actually what you were saying there about not being able to assume that everyone knows everything, goes for delegation as well, I think. So definitely some parallels there. Definitely some parallels
some
there.
parallels.
Okay, so we've spoken about how we like to be managed. We've spoken about how we can manage up, even though it can be a little bit tricky sometimes. I want to think about how if you are an individual contributor, you can actually step into that management role, maybe if you're managing your peers on a project, for example. So how do you go about doing that? Reuben, I'll come to you.
I think for me there, it's remembering that even as an individual contributor, you can still be a leader.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is no longer just a title and a role for old white males to be doing. It's now a thing that everyone can exhibit as a behavior. We can all take the time to really think about how we can contribute to a project as a leader with the sort of behaviors we take. And I think specifically then, in more detail, it's about not just doing your task, ticking the box on a to-do list, but having the time and the headspace to really understand the goal of a project or where you're trying to go. It could pretty easily just be something you leave for the person that's running the project. But actually, if you're now contributing, you're now part of that team, you also want to get to that goal. There's also somewhere you want to get to and achieve. Having that bigger picture in mind really helps you see the small details that might be missed and start to lead and start to manage as well.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So actually thinking a bit more strategically, like you say, looking at that bigger picture, seeing how the smaller bits fit in. And what I'm also hearing is a bit of taking responsibility, taking accountability within that project, both with how you show up and how you expect others to show up. Would that be fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Blair, turn it to you.
Yeah, I think thinking about that question, I sort of started thinking about it in like reverse. I don't know if that's the right way to think about it, but when we think about being an individual contributor, I actually think about like what keeps us from leading, like what stops us from stepping into a leadership position. And I think oftentimes it's, I know this is your favorite phrase because this doesn't exist for Millie, imposter syndrome. Which, let's talk about that on the next podcast.
Yeah, we actually should.
We really should. It's a good topic. But oftentimes imposter syndrome keeps you from leading, fear of inadequacy or not having the right level of expertise. There's so many things that keeps us from not putting our hand up, right? And I'm saying that from personal experience as well. I know I'm very hesitant to put my hand up because I often think that everyone else is more credible than me. So I think in order to step into leadership as an individual contributor, recognize those things, face them, and figure out how to move past them because they don't serve you. They simply don't. So the moment I started realizing, oh, actually, I do have something to say. I do have something to contribute. And I want to make sure that I'm being open about these things and speaking up more and pushing past that fear, then I ended up naturally just leading without even thinking about the fact that I was leading. I think that's what then led to me being asked to manage grads and things like that, because I just started out just wanting to help people. And then people recognized that and they were like, oh, well, these grads coming in, why don't you manage them? You seem to like this part of your job. And then that naturally put me into a leadership position. But I wasn't thinking I want to lead. I was thinking I want to help. And I do have something credible and valuable to share with people. So, yeah.
I think that's really interesting as well. And thinking about, management versus leadership, I think in that instance, a good manager actually does want to help their team grow and succeed. And that's part of the joys of managing someone, right? Is watching their progression. So you almost started, it sounds like, with kind of quiet management that then got kind of recognized, picked up, and that gave you the competence to then manage more grads when they came in, maybe in a bit more of a formal way. So we've actually used those two terms interchangeably today, management versus leadership. What do we think? What's the difference?
Give me a second. Because I actually had a thought when you were saying management versus leadership. I think that management was something that I saw as a skill that related to competence only, which is really funny because we talk about this in management training.
Yeah.
And so I never saw myself as a manager. But I always understood leadership as showing up for other people, being there for other people, supporting people, and getting people from A to B, like basically taking them on this journey, getting to this shared goal, objective, whatever it is we're trying to achieve. And that is essentially management as well. Like leadership is a big aspect of management. Of course, you have to have the competence and the expertise as well to manage in a specific area or industry or whatever it may be. But leadership is a skill that I think supports management as well, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does.
Yeah, I like it. Reuben, what do you think?
Adding to that, I'd say that management is more micro. It's more processes, tasks, tools, getting something done. Whereas leadership's more macro. It's more culture, how we do things, how we behave, who we are, rather than necessarily what we're doing.
Interesting. Micro versus macro. I like that. I like that. Okay. So just kind of keeping on that theme then of managing projects or managing peers, I want to know what you've learned about management or leadership from taking on a role where you've had to manage a project and manage other people, and how do you think that will inform how you manage someone maybe when you actually do have some direct line reports?
Go ahead if you want.
I think we're really lucky here because we have a studio. We're really lucky that we have a studio because everything looks beautiful, but we're also really lucky because people like me early on in their career get the chance to manage and lead because we're often delegating tasks to the studio to get the things that we do that doesn't look so pretty to look stunning and amazing. And that gives us the opportunity to think about those sort of things, how we manage, how we delegate tasks. One of the biggest things that I've taken away from this, and actually it was something Blair told me probably week one, was that everyone does things a little bit differently and everyone likes to be given a task differently. So for me, when managing people and delegating these sort of tasks, it's about knowing who I'm delegating to, how they want to be told what the task is, how they want to be managed, what sort of streams of communication they like. Do they want me to get out my desk and walk around and have a chat and see how things are doing? Do they want me to put it in a Slack message? Do they want to be checked in on? Do they want to be left to work and they'll tell me how it's getting on? All those sort of things can come down to some sort of management best practice. There's probably books written on it, but also it can just come down to who the person is and how well you know them.
So really investing the time to get to know your future team, the people that you're managing, and exactly how they want to be communicated with and how they work best as well when you're communicating with them.
100%.
Fabulous. Blair, anything to add?
Basically my answer. That was it. I was going to say that. I think it's a promise I'm not taking the easy way out, but as you're saying, I was like, dang it, that's what I was going to say. But I think it is like adaptability because I think I am more of like the people side of of the process, of like the management process. Like, I don't mind sitting down and having a chat with someone, but I know due to the different, honestly, just the grads that I've managed alone, all three of you are so different. And I had to learn how to adapt to each of your styles. And I think that was one of the first things when we had our first conversation was, I think I did ask, like, how do you like to be managed? And then I just adapt to that. As far as like peers, I think your question was specifically about like peers within a project. And by peers, I'm going to go with the definition of people who are on the same level of expertise as you. So it's more horizontal. I think it still applies, but also I think what I've learned recently is actually you do have to apply a bit of hierarchy. And that's something that I've learned because sometimes with your peers, when they are the same level of expertise as you, they may sometimes have their ideas of how something should be done. And I think there does have to come a point where they do defer a little bit because ultimately it's your client, your project, you're bringing them on. But I think learning to be, and I don't want to say firm in a negative way, but learning to say, you know, I appreciate your input, but knowing like when that input can be applied, but when you kind of have to say, okay, it just needs to be done this way because I know the client, I know the account, I know what they need. So bringing in some of that situational leadership, like knowing when to pull back, but when to actually step in a bit more. So.
And actually trusting that you know the client and you know what is needed in this situation. Of course, you have to be open to everyone's ideas.
Of course.
And you have to listen to them and process them. And, you know, if it works, it works. Try a new idea. But sometimes, being firm, drawing that line, instilling that hierarchy. I love hearing Blair say that.
Well, it's only because I'm someone who's always so open to everyone else's ideas. And I still have that back and forth of thinking everyone else in the room is, you know, super credible and super intelligent. But I had to learn to go with my instinct sometimes and say, that is a great idea. I would love to do it, but this is actually a client that I know very well. And I know that this isn't going to work for them. This would be fun for us to do, but actually let's keep it to this. So knowing what to take in and then what to kind of put your foot down about. So, yeah.
Fantastic. All right. Wow. Thank you both for such a wonderful conversation. I feel like it's interesting to discuss management maybe from the kind of reverse angle like we've done today. So that's been really interesting. So thanks for sharing your thoughts. And this has been Sparks, a series from Sagos. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.